Released from prison at midnight, Marcus Johnson went straight to one place, and what he did there would shake the entire justice system to its core. The iron gates of Redwood State Penitentiary slammed shut behind him at exactly 12:03 a.m. on a cold November night. Most inmates released after serving their sentence walk out during daylight hours, surrounded by family, flowers, and cameras. But Marcus had specifically requested a midnight release. No fanfare, no witnesses, no questions. He stood there for exactly 7 seconds, breathing in the freezing air like a man tasting freedom for the first time in 4,380 days. 12 years. 12 years stolen from a man who never committed the crime they said he did. At 42 years old, Marcus looked nothing like the frightened 30-year-old construction worker who had been dragged into that courtroom with his hands cuffed and his future shattered. Prison had carved deep lines into his face, turned his hair gray at the temples, and given his eyes a hardness that made even the guards uncomfortable during his final week. But tonight, those eyes burned with something else entirely. Purpose. A single cab waited in the darkness, its engine idling. Marcus climbed in without a word. "Where to?" the driver asked, glancing nervously at the gaunt figure in his rearview mirror. Marcus pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. On it, an address written in faded pencil, 271 Oakmont Drive. He'd memorized it years ago, but kept the paper anyway. A reminder. A promise to himself. Oakmont Drive. The quiet part of town. The driver's eyebrows rose. That was where the wealthy lived. Judges, politicians, successful lawyers. Not the kind of neighborhood that attracted ex-cons at midnight. 23 minutes later, the cab pulled up to a sprawling 2-story colonial house with perfect landscaping and a BMW in the driveway. Every window was dark except one on the second floor, where a faint blue glow suggested someone was still awake, probably watching television. Marcus paid the fare with bills he'd saved from his prison job over 12 years, working in the laundry for 70 cents an hour. The driver sped away the moment the money touched his hand, clearly wanting no part of whatever was about to happen. Standing on the perfectly manicured lawn, Marcus looked up at that second-floor window. Inside that house lived District Attorney Richard Caldwell, the man who had prosecuted his case with such passion and conviction. The man who had stood before that jury and painted Marcus not as a construction worker who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, but as a violent criminal who deserved to rot behind bars. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Caldwell had said, his voice dripping with theatrical outrage, "this man broke into the Martinez home, assaulted an innocent family, and stole everything they had. The evidence is overwhelming. The fingerprints match. The witness testimony is clear. Marcus Johnson is guilty, and he must pay for his crimes." Except Marcus hadn't done it. And deep down, Caldwell knew it. A quick flashback hit Marcus as he stood there in the cold, the moment 3 weeks into his sentence when his cellmate, a career criminal named Tommy Fingers McGrath, had gotten drunk on prison hooch and started bragging about jobs he'd pulled. One of them sounded disturbingly familiar. "Yeah, that Martinez job was sweet," Tommy had slurred. "Rich family, easy lock, grabbed their jewelry and cash. Cops never even got close to me. Some construction guy took the fall. Poor bastard." Marcus had felt his blood turn to ice. He'd casually asked more questions over the following weeks, playing it cool, gaining Tommy's trust. Eventually, Tommy showed him photos he'd hidden, pictures of jewelry he'd stolen and sold, including pieces that had been presented as evidence in Marcus's trial. But here was the thing that turned Marcus's wrongful conviction into something far more sinister. When he tried to present this information through proper channels, letters to his public defender, requests for appeals, even a detailed report to the prison warden, everything had been blocked. His letters never got responses. His appeals were denied before even being properly reviewed. Someone with power was making sure Marcus Johnson stayed exactly where he was. Then came the break that changed everything. A new lawyer, fresh out of law school and working pro bono cases, had taken interest in his file. Her name was Sarah Chun, and she had a reputation for being relentlessly thorough. She'd uncovered something that Marcus had only suspected, evidence that Caldwell had suppressed during the original trial. A security camera from a gas station 2 blocks from the Martinez home had captured footage of someone matching Tommy McGrath's description leaving the area at the exact time of the robbery. That footage had mysteriously never made it into evidence. When Sarah filed a motion for release based on prosecutorial misconduct and new evidence, the judge had no choice but to grant it. But Marcus knew something that Sarah didn't. Something he discovered in his final month inside, when a corrupt prison guard had gotten sloppy and left classified documents in the wrong file cabinet. Documents that revealed Caldwell hadn't just suppressed evidence in Marcus's case, he'd done it in at least 8 other cases. All defendants had been poor, most had been minorities, and all had been convicted based on questionable evidence. Caldwell had built his entire political career on a tough-on-crime image, with a conviction rate that seemed almost superhuman. Turned out it was superhuman, because he was cheating. Now Marcus stood at the door of 271 Oakmont Drive, a small backpack slung over his shoulder. Inside that backpack were copies of every document he'd managed to smuggle out, every letter he'd written that had been lost, every piece of evidence that proved Richard Caldwell was not the champion of justice he pretended to be, but a fraud who destroyed innocent lives to advance his career. Marcus rang the doorbell. Upstairs, a light flicked on. Footsteps on stairs. The porch light blazed to life, and through the decorative glass panels of the front door, Marcus could see a figure approaching. The door opened just a crack, security chains still attached. Richard Caldwell stood there, older now, his face lined with age but still carrying that same smug confidence that had filled the courtroom 12 years ago. Their eyes met. For exactly 3 seconds, Caldwell's face went through a fascinating transformation: confusion, recognition, shock, and finally fear. "Marcus Johnson," Caldwell said slowly, his hand tightening on the door. "You're not supposed to be released?" "Yeah, I am. As of 1 hour ago." Marcus's voice was calm, almost gentle. "We need to talk, Mr. Caldwell. About Tommy McGrath. About suppressed evidence. And about the 8 other innocent people whose lives you destroyed." Caldwell's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave my property right now, or I'm calling the police." Marcus smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "Please do. I was actually hoping you would." He pulled out his phone, and in that moment, Caldwell saw something that made his blood run cold. On the screen was a video file, paused on a frame showing Caldwell himself in his office, clearly visible, holding documents and speaking to someone off camera. "See, the thing about prison," Marcus said conversationally, "is that you meet all kinds of people, including a former AV tech who used to install security systems. He taught me some interesting things about hidden cameras, and about how modern technology can be very, very small." The color drained completely from Caldwell's face. "I think you're going to want to hear what I have to say," Marcus continued. "Because in about 10 minutes, copies of everything I've collected are going to be delivered to every major news outlet in the state. Unless you and I come to an understanding right now." Standing there in the doorway of his perfect house, District Attorney Richard Caldwell realized that the man he'd sent to prison 12 years ago had not come back broken or defeated. He'd come back prepared, strategic, and holding cards that could destroy everything Caldwell had built. And the worst part? Caldwell had given him 12 years to plan this moment down to every last detail. What neither of them knew was that watching from a car parked 3 houses down, someone else was documenting this entire encounter. Someone who had their own reasons for wanting to see Richard Caldwell's empire crumble. But that revelation would come later, at exactly the right moment to change everything once again. If you're invested in finding out how an innocent man spent 12 years preparing the perfect revenge against the prosecutor who destroyed his life, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because what happens next will prove that sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't violence, but truth delivered with surgical precision. Caldwell's hand trembled slightly as he maintained his grip on the door, but his voice carried that same prosecutorial authority that had once commanded courtrooms. "You think you can threaten me? I'm a district attorney. Whatever fantasy you've constructed in your cell, whatever conspiracy theories you've convinced yourself are real, they mean nothing. You were convicted by a jury of your peers based on solid evidence." "Solid evidence," Marcus repeated, his tone flat. "Is that what you call fingerprints that Tommy McGrath planted using gloves he stole from my construction site? Or the witness testimony from a neighbor who later recanted, saying your office pressured her to identify me even though she told them she wasn't sure?" The witness never recanted officially. And even if McGrath claims involvement now, criminals lie. It's what they do. Caldwell's recovery was impressive. His initial shock had transformed into the polished confidence of a man who'd talked his way out of difficult situations his entire career. "If you had real evidence, your lawyer would have gone through proper channels, not sent you to my house in the middle of the night like some vigilante." Marcus reached into his backpack and pulled out a thick folder. Saracen did go through proper channels. Filed every motion correctly, presented every piece of new evidence according to procedure. That's why I'm standing here legally released, not escaped. But here's what Sarah doesn't know yet. He opened the folder to reveal a photograph. Even in the dim porch light, Caldwell could see it clearly, himself 12 years younger, meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside a restaurant. The man was Victor Raines, a real estate developer known for his connections to organized crime. "That's me having lunch with a business associate," Caldwell said dismissively. "Perfectly legal." 3 days before my trial started. The same Victor Raines who wanted to buy the Martinez property for a fraction of its value, but the family refused to sell. The same property that became available at a bargain price after the family, traumatized by the robbery, finally agreed to leave the neighborhood. The same property that Raines developed into luxury condos worth $40 million. Caldwell's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You're suggesting what, exactly?" "That I sent an innocent man to prison to help a real estate deal." "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts." Tommy McGrath was hired by Raines's people to rob the Martinez family and make it violent enough that they'd want to leave. When Tommy got sloppy and left evidence, you needed a conviction fast to keep the heat off the real perpetrators. I was convenient, a construction worker at the wrong place, no money for a real lawyer, no powerful friends. Perfect scapegoat. The emotion hit Marcus then, rising from somewhere deep he'd kept locked away for 12 years. His voice cracked slightly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to scream the truth and have no one believe you? To watch your mother die of a heart attack 3 years into your sentence because the stress literally killed her? To miss your daughter's entire childhood. She was 7 when I went in, she's 19 now, and she barely knows who I am because my ex-wife convinced her I was a monster." For a moment, genuine humanity flickered across Caldwell's face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "Your personal tragedies, however unfortunate, don't change the facts of your case. Every defendant claims innocence. Every family suffers. That's not my fault, it's the fault of criminals who commit crimes. Except I didn't commit this one." Marcus pulled out his phone again, this time showing a different video. "This is from 6 weeks ago. That's you in your office, meeting with a man named James Peterson. He's currently serving 15 years for armed robbery. But according to the security footage Saracen recently obtained, Peterson was at his sister's wedding in Florida when the robbery occurred. There are photos, timestamps, witnesses. Your office knew this and buried it." Caldwell's composure cracked slightly. "That case is none of your business. And if you're recording this conversation without my consent, that's illegal wiretapping. Actually, in this state, only one party needs to consent to recording. I consent." Marcus's smile was grim. "But you're right about one thing. Peterson's case isn't my business. Neither are the 6 other cases I found where you suppressed exculpatory evidence. But I made them my business because I needed to understand if I was just unlucky, or if destroying innocent lives was your standard operating procedure." A flash of memory hit Marcus, his 3rd year inside, when he'd been jumped by 3 inmates in the prison yard. They'd beaten him badly enough to crack 2 ribs and give him a concussion. Later, he'd learned the attack wasn't random. One of the inmates had received extra commissary money and a promise of reduced time for teaching Johnson a lesson. The order had come from outside. Someone wanted to make sure Marcus stayed broken, stayed quiet, stopped filing appeals. "You tried to have me killed," Marcus said quietly. Winter of year 3. 3 guys, prison yard, during the shift change when guards were scarce. The ringleader's name was Devin Walsh. He told me everything before he died last year. Lung cancer, wanted to clear his conscience. Said a man matching your description visited him before the attack, made promises about his sentence getting reduced if he handled a problem inmate. Caldwell's face went ashen. "That's a lie. Devin Walsh was a career criminal. His word means nothing." His deathbed confession was recorded by the prison chaplain, Father Michael Torres. Very credible witness, Father Torres. Former Marine chaplain, decorated veteran, no history of dishonesty. He recorded it because Devin specifically asked him to, said he needed someone to know the truth before he met his maker. The night air felt colder suddenly. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and fell silent. "What do you want?" Caldwell asked finally, his voice losing its authoritative edge. Money? I can arrange. I don't want your money. Marcus cut him off. I want you to understand what you took from me. 12 years. 4,380 days. I missed my daughter Claire's 8th birthday party, her first day of high school, her graduation, her first heartbreak, everything. I wasn't there when my mother had her heart attack. She called my name before she died, and I couldn't even hold her hand because I was chained to a hospital bed with a guard watching me like an animal. Marcus's voice broke completely on those last words. Raw grief poured out, the kind that can only come from wounds that never properly healed. My daughter wrote me letters for the first 3 years. Every week. Daddy, when are you coming home? Daddy, I miss you. Daddy, Mom says you did something bad, but I don't believe her. Then the letters stopped. My ex-wife told her I didn't want to see her anymore, that I'd abandoned her. Claire turned 18 last year and legally changed her last name so she wouldn't have to share mine. A tear rolled down Marcus's cheek, and he didn't bother wiping it away. So no, Mr. Caldwell, I don't want your money. I want you to feel a fraction of what I felt. Caldwell stepped back slightly, and for the first time, something that might have been guilt flickered in his eyes. Look, I was doing my job. The evidence pointed to you. If there were mistakes made, they were made by others. I prosecuted based on what I was given. You prosecuted based on what you chose to see. Marcus closed the folder. But here's what's really interesting. 3 days ago, I received a visitor at Redwood. A former assistant in your office, Jennifer Walsh. She left the prosecutor's office 5 years ago after what she described as a crisis of conscience. She brought me something very interesting. Caldwell's face went rigid. Jennifer Walsh is a disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind. Whatever she told you. She brought me copies of internal memos. One showing you were warned by your own investigators that the fingerprint evidence in my case was questionable. That Tommy McGrath had a history of robberies matching the Martinez pattern. That the timeline didn't work for my supposed involvement. Marcus pulled out another document. You were told explicitly that you might be prosecuting the wrong man. And you proceeded anyway. The night air suddenly felt heavier. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed briefly before fading. Jennifer also told me about the promotion you received 3 months after my conviction. Deputy District Attorney to District Attorney. That conviction, my conviction, was the centerpiece of your campaign. Tough on crime Richard Caldwell, putting violent offenders away. Except I wasn't violent, and I wasn't an offender. Caldwell's hands clenched at his sides. My career advancement had nothing to do with your case. I've prosecuted hundreds of cases successfully. And how many of those hundreds involved suppressing evidence? How many innocent people are sitting in cells right now because you needed wins more than you needed truth? Marcus's voice rose slightly. Jennifer kept records. She has a storage unit full of files from cases where she saw you cut corners, hide evidence, intimidate witnesses. She's been carrying that guilt for 5 years, and now she's ready to testify. She'll be destroyed on cross-examination. Her credibility is intact, Marcus interrupted. She left your office on good terms, no scandals, no disciplinary actions. She's now a law professor at the state university with an impeccable reputation. And she's not the only one. 2 other former prosecutors from your office have contacted my lawyer in the last month, both willing to provide testimony about your methods. This was the escalating tension, the mounting evidence that Caldwell's world was crumbling faster than he realized. Each revelation stripped away another layer of his defense, exposing the rot underneath. You're bluffing, Caldwell said, but doubt crept into his voice. If you had all this evidence, you would have used it already. I am using it. Right now. You see, Mr. Caldwell, prison taught me something valuable about timing. Strike too early, and your enemy has time to prepare defenses, call in favors, make evidence disappear. But strike at exactly the right moment, say the night of your release when everyone thinks you'll either celebrate or hide, and you catch them completely off guard. Marcus checked his phone. It's 1:47 a.m. In approximately 5 hours, the morning news cycle begins. In 6 hours, the courthouse opens. In 7 hours, my lawyer files a motion not just for my exoneration, but for a criminal investigation into your conduct. And she'll have Jennifer Walsh, the other former prosecutors, forensic analysts who'll testify about the fingerprint evidence problems, and a very compelling narrative about a prosecutor who destroyed lives to build a career. Caldwell's face had gone pale. You can't prove intentional misconduct. At worst, you'll prove sloppy police work, which isn't my fault. Except the memos prove you knew. Jennifer's testimony proves you knew. The other prosecutor's statements prove this was a pattern, not an accident. And Tommy McGrath, currently serving time in the same prison I just left, has agreed to provide a detailed confession in exchange for testimony against you. He'll describe exactly how he committed the Martinez robbery, details only the real perpetrator would know. The mention of McGrath testifying seemed to drain the last bit of fight from Caldwell. His shoulders sagged slightly. What do you want from me? I already told you. I want you to understand what you took. But more than that, I want you to face consequences. For me, for the others, for every person whose life you casually destroyed because it was convenient for your ambitions. Marcus's voice grew cold. You spent your career sending people to cages. Now you're going to experience what that feels like. I'll fight this, Caldwell said, but his voice lacked conviction. I'll hire the best lawyers, and You'll lose, Marcus said simply. Because I have something you never gave your defendants, the truth, properly documented, impossible to deny. And unlike you, I'm not hiding anything. Every piece of evidence I have will be presented in open court, available to public scrutiny. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Caldwell asked quietly, how did you do this? How did a construction worker with no legal training, sitting in a prison cell, manage to build a case against a district attorney? For the first time, Marcus smiled, a real smile, not one of anger or bitterness. I had help. People who believed in justice more than they believed in protecting the system. And I had time, 12 years to study, to learn, to plan every detail. You gave me that gift when you sent me away. You created your own worst enemy. Caldwell stood there in his doorway, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. The confident prosecutor who'd commanded courtrooms was gone, replaced by a man realizing he'd made a fatal error, he'd underestimated his victim. Get off my property, Caldwell said finally, his voice hollow. Marcus nodded and turned to leave. But at the edge of the driveway, he paused and looked back. One more thing. Tommy McGrath told me something interesting before I left Redwood. He said you visited him 2 months after my conviction. Gave him extra commissary money and told him to keep quiet about the Martinez job. He said you told him, Johnson's problem is taken care of, stay silent and you'll never be connected to it. Caldwell's face went ashen white. Tommy kept the receipt with your signature on it. Thought it might be useful someday. Turns out he was right. Marcus's smile was grim. Sleep well, Mr. Caldwell. You have about 5 more hours before your entire world ends. As Marcus walked away into the darkness, he could feel Caldwell's eyes boring into his back. But he didn't look back again. Behind him stood a man who'd built his life on lies and corruption. Ahead of him lay something he hadn't experienced in 12 years, the freedom to fight back with the full force of truth on his side. What Caldwell didn't know, what nobody except Marcus knew in that moment, was that every word of their conversation had been recorded on 3 separate devices, backed up to cloud servers, and would be available to investigators within hours. The trap wasn't just set, it had already closed. Caldwell just hadn't realized he was caught yet. The real question wasn't whether justice would come for Richard Caldwell. The question was whether the system that had enabled him would finally find the courage to clean its own house, or if Marcus's fight would expose corruption so deep that it would shake the entire justice system to its foundations. And the answer to that question would unfold in ways even Marcus hadn't fully anticipated, revealing allies and enemies in places he never expected to find them. Marcus walked 3 blocks before allowing himself to breathe normally. The adrenaline from confronting Caldwell was fading, replaced by exhaustion that went bone deep. 12 years of planning, and the first phase was complete. But the hardest part was still ahead. He pulled out a prepaid phone, one of 3 he'd arranged to have waiting for him, and dialed a number he'd memorized years ago. Marcus. The voice on the other end belonged to Raymond Cole, and hearing it alive and well sent a wave of emotion through Marcus's chest. Wait. That wasn't right. Raymond had died 6 months ago in prison. Marcus shook his head, realizing the grief and exhaustion were playing tricks on his mind. The voice actually belonged to Elena Cole, Raymond's daughter. "It's done," Marcus said simply. "He knows I'm coming for him, but he doesn't know how deep this goes." "Good. The lawyer is standing by, and the files are ready to submit at 7 a.m. Did you get him talking on recording?" "Every word. 3 backup recordings uploading to the cloud right now." Marcus paused at a corner, checking his surroundings out of habit. A skill prison had taught him well. "Elena, your father would be proud of what you've done." There was a brief silence. "He died believing you'd get justice. Let's make sure he was right. Get to the safe house. Sarah's waiting there with the final documents you need to review." The safe house was a modest apartment Elena had rented under a false name 3 months earlier. When Marcus arrived at 2:34 a.m., Sarah Chun was pacing the small living room, files spread across every surface. "You actually did it," she said, looking up. "You walked into a prosecutor's house and confronted him. Do you have any idea how risky that was?" "Calculated risk. I needed him to show his hand, to react. Now we know he's scared, and scared people make mistakes." Marcus picked up one of the files. "This is everything." Sarah nodded. 23 cases where Caldwell suppressed evidence. 14 where he received financial benefits. 8 where defendants can prove innocence. Jennifer Walsh's testimony is recorded and notarized. The 2 other former prosecutors signed affidavits. Tommy McGrath's confession is documented with a public defender present. This was the moment Marcus needed to reveal the full scope of his preparation, work that had taken years, not days. "In year 4 of my sentence, I started corresponding with a paralegal student named Marcus Thompson. Shared my first name, which is how we connected. He was studying wrongful convictions for his thesis. I gave him my case details, and he found the first holes in Caldwell's prosecution." Marcus sat down heavily, fatigue catching up with him. "Marcus Thompson introduced me to his professor, who introduced me to an innocence project, who connected me with Raymond Cole when he arrived at Redwood. Raymond had been an investigative journalist for 30 years before contempt charges put him inside. He knew how to build cases that couldn't be torn apart. Raymond taught me everything," Marcus continued, emotion tightening his voice. "How to document evidence, how to cross-reference public records, how to identify patterns in corruption. When he got sick, he made Elena promise to finish what we started. She spent 2 years pulling property records, campaign finance reports, court transcripts, thousands of pages of data." Sarah pulled out a laptop. Elena's analysis showed that in every major case Caldwell prosecuted, someone connected to him financially benefited within 6 months. Real estate developers, business owners, even a city councilman. It's a web of corruption that goes back 15 years. But it hadn't been easy. Marcus remembered the obstacles: appeals that were denied, letters that disappeared, the prison attack that left him hospitalized for 2 weeks. Someone had been actively working to keep him buried. "In year 7, I filed my 4th appeal," Marcus said. "It was the strongest one yet, with new evidence and witness statements. The judge denied it without even a hearing. I found out later the judge played golf with Caldwell twice a month. The system was rigged at every level." That's when Raymond had changed tactics. "Stop fighting through official channels," Raymond had told him. "They control those channels. Build your case in secret, document everything, and wait until you're out. Then hit them with everything at once, in public, where they can't bury it." Sarah interrupted his thoughts. "There's something else you need to know. The FBI has been investigating Victor Raines for 18 months. They don't know about Caldwell's involvement yet, but they will after we file tomorrow. I have a contact at the Bureau, Special Agent Karen Martinez. She specializes in public corruption." This was the small victory, the hope. The feds were already circling Raines, which meant Caldwell's connections to him would become relevant evidence in an existing investigation. "Agent Martinez wants to meet you," Sarah continued. "She's coming here at 5 a.m., before we file. She needs to hear your story directly." Marcus checked his watch. 3:17 a.m. Less than 2 hours before the FBI agent arrived. Less than 4 hours before the filing that would end Caldwell's career. But something nagged at him. "Caldwell was too confident at first," Marcus said slowly. He expected me to threaten him with violence, to give him a reason to call the police and have me sent back inside. When I showed him evidence instead, he got scared, but not scared enough. He's planning something. Sarah's expression darkened. You think he'll try to run? Or discredit us somehow? He's a prosecutor. He knows how to manipulate narratives. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark street. We need to file earlier than 7 a.m. As soon as Agent Martinez leaves, we go straight to the courthouse. File the moment it opens at 6 a.m. The press conference isn't scheduled until. Forget the press conference. We release everything online simultaneously with the filing. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. We put it on a website that Elena built, and we send the links to every media outlet in the state. We don't give Caldwell time to prepare a response. This was the preparation showing through, years of thinking through every possible countermove, every way Caldwell might try to escape accountability. Marcus had learned in prison that giving your enemy time to think was giving them time to destroy you. Sarah was already typing on her laptop. I'll text Elena now. She can have the website live by 5:30 a.m. A knock on the door made both of them freeze. It was 3:24 a.m. No one should know they were here. Marcus moved to the peephole cautiously. Outside stood a young woman in her late teens or early 20s, her face illuminated by the hallway light. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder repeatedly. I don't know her, Marcus whispered to Sarah. The woman knocked again, then leaned close to the door. Mr. Johnson? I'm Claire. Elena sent me. Please, we don't have much time. Claire. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. His daughter was named Claire. But his Claire was 19 now, and he hadn't seen her since she was 7. This couldn't be. Sarah opened the door a crack, security chain attached. Who did you say you are? Claire Johnson. Marcus's daughter. Elena Cole is my godmother. She told me where to find you. The young woman pulled out her phone, showing a text message from Elena's number confirming her identity. Please. Dad needs to know something about Caldwell that changes everything. Marcus felt his legs go weak. His daughter. Here. Now. After 12 years of silence, of believing she hated him, of accepting he'd lost her forever. Sarah looked at him. Your call. With shaking hands, Marcus unhooked the security chain and opened the door. The young woman who stepped inside had his eyes, his mother's smile, and 12 years of life he'd missed written in every feature of her face. Hi, Dad, Claire said, tears streaming down her cheeks. I never stopped believing you were innocent. And I've been helping Elena build this case for 2 years. The revelation hit Marcus harder than any punch he'd taken in prison. His daughter hadn't abandoned him. She'd been fighting for him all along, working in secret because she knew if Caldwell discovered her involvement, he'd find a way to discredit the evidence. Claire has something you need to see, Elena's voice came through speakerphone. Something that proves Caldwell isn't just corrupt, he's desperate. And desperate people do dangerous things. Claire pulled out a tablet and showed Marcus photos taken earlier that night. Caldwell making phone calls, meeting someone in a parking garage, handing over an envelope of cash. After you left his house, Caldwell contacted someone, Claire explained. I've been surveilling him for 3 months, and I've never seen him this panicked. Dad, I think he's hiring someone too. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Marcus understood immediately. Caldwell wasn't planning to run or discredit them legally. He was planning something much worse, something that would silence Marcus permanently before the truth could come out. The same way he'd arranged the prison attack in year 3, Caldwell was preparing to eliminate the problem once and for all. The game had just changed completely. And they had less than 3 hours to execute a plan that would either expose Caldwell's corruption or get Marcus killed trying. Show me everything, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. Who did Caldwell contact? Claire swiped through the photos on her tablet. The man he met in the parking garage is Vincent Torres. Former police officer, fired 3 years ago for excessive force. He now works as what the streets call a problem solver. I've documented him meeting with Caldwell twice in the past 6 months, always after midnight, always in locations without security cameras. Sarah leaned in, studying the images. This is serious. If Caldwell hired Torres to eliminate you, we need to contact the police immediately. The police? Marcus laughed bitterly. Half of them probably still think I'm guilty. And the other half won't move against a district attorney without ironclad proof. By the time they investigate, Torres will have made his move. Then what do we do? Claire asked, and Marcus heard the fear in her daughter's voice. Fear for him. He looked at his daughter properly for the first time, really seeing her. 19 years old, brave enough to surveil a corrupt prosecutor, smart enough to document everything, strong enough to fight for a father she barely remembered. Pride and heartbreak warred in his chest. We accelerate everything, Marcus decided. Sarah, call Agent Martinez. Tell her to come now, not at 5 a.m. Claire, send Elena those photos of Caldwell and Torres immediately. And get me Torres's location history for the last week. While Claire worked on her tablet, Marcus pulled out the recordings from his confrontation with Caldwell. If Torres is coming for me, he'll expect me to be hiding or running. Instead, we're going to give him exactly what Caldwell paid him to prevent, a public exposure so complete that killing me becomes pointless. The evidence will already be out. At 4:17 a.m., Special Agent Karen Martinez arrived at the safe house with 2 other federal agents. She was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Mr. Johnson, she said, shaking his hand firmly. I've been investigating Victor Raines's organization for 18 months. Your lawyer tells me you have evidence connecting District Attorney Caldwell to Raines's operation. More than that, Marcus replied. I have evidence of a 15-year conspiracy involving prosecutorial misconduct, bribery, and witness tampering. And as of 2 hours ago, I have evidence that Caldwell has hired someone to kill me to prevent this from coming out. Agent Martinez's expression hardened. Show me. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus, Sarah, and Claire presented everything. The recordings of Caldwell's admissions, Jennifer Walsh's testimony, the other prosecutors' affidavits, Tommy McGrath's confession, the financial connections to Raines, and finally, the surveillance photos of Caldwell meeting with Vincent Torres. Agent Martinez made a phone call, speaking in clipped tones. When she hung up, she looked at Marcus. Torres is a known associate of the Raines organization. If Caldwell hired him, it connects your prosecutorial misconduct case directly to our RICO investigation. That gives us federal jurisdiction. What does that mean? Claire asked. It means, Agent Martinez said with a grim smile, that we can arrest Caldwell right now. Not on state charges that he might wiggle out of, but on federal racketeering charges. And we can pick up Torres before he makes his move on your father. The plan came together with military precision. Agent Martinez's team would arrest Torres at his apartment while simultaneously executing a warrant at Caldwell's home. The evidence Marcus had gathered would be entered into the federal case, and Sarah would file the state motions for Marcus's exoneration and the review of other cases. But Marcus added one more element. When you arrest Caldwell, I want to be there. I want him to see my face and know that he failed. Agent Martinez hesitated. That's irregular. So is a district attorney trying to have a witness murdered. I've earned this moment. At 5:43 a.m., 4 federal vehicles pulled up to 271 Oakmont Drive. The sun was just beginning to brighten the eastern sky, painting Caldwell's perfect neighborhood in shades of pink and gold. Marcus sat in an unmarked car with Agent Martinez, watching as tactical agents took positions. He's awake, one agent reported via radio. Lights just came on upstairs. Agent Martinez nodded to her team. Go. The front door splintered open under a battering ram. Agents flooded into the house, their voices sharp and commanding. Federal agents. Richard Caldwell, show yourself. Through a window, Marcus could see the chaos. Agents moving through rooms, Caldwell appearing at the top of the stairs in a bathrobe, his face a mask of shock and fury. Mrs. Caldwell screamed. Papers scattered as agents began executing the search warrant. Caldwell was brought outside in handcuffs, his face red with rage. This is outrageous. I'm a district attorney. You have no right. We have every right, Agent Martinez said calmly, holding up the warrant. Richard Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, obstruction of justice, and bribery. You have the right to remain silent. That's when Caldwell saw Marcus stepping out of the unmarked car. The color drained from his face completely. "No," Caldwell whispered. "No, you're supposed to be dead." Marcus finished, walking closer. "Vincent Torres is in federal custody right now. Whatever you paid him, it wasn't enough to risk a murder-for-hire charge. He gave you up within 10 minutes of arrest." Caldwell's legs buckled slightly. 2 agents held him upright. "This isn't over. I have rights, I have lawyers." "You had a career built on lies," Marcus interrupted, his voice carrying an edge of steel forged in 12 years of injustice. "You had power you abused. You had trust you betrayed. And now you have nothing but consequences." At exactly 6 a.m., as Caldwell was being loaded into a federal transport vehicle, Elena Cole pressed a button on her laptop 300 miles away. The Caldwell Files website went live, immediately receiving traffic from the links sent to every major news outlet in the country. By 6:15 a.m., the first news helicopter arrived at Caldwell's house, capturing footage of a district attorney in handcuffs. By 6:30 a.m., the story was breaking on national news. By 7 a.m., #Caldwell Files was trending on every social media platform, with journalists downloading documents and discovering the depth of the corruption. Marcus watched it unfold from Sarah's office, Claire beside him, as television screens showed reporter after reporter describing the scandal. 23 cases compromised. 8 potentially innocent people in prison. 15 years of systematic corruption. Connections to organized crime. The state attorney general held an emergency press conference at 8 a.m., announcing immediate reviews of every case Caldwell had prosecuted. The governor followed at 8:30 a.m., promising a complete investigation of the prosecutor's office and calling for criminal justice reform. By 9 a.m., James Peterson, the man serving 15 years based on suppressed evidence of an alibi, had an emergency hearing scheduled. His family wept on camera, thanking Marcus and the investigative team for exposing the truth. By 10 a.m., 3 other inmates Caldwell had wrongly convicted had lawyers filing for immediate release. The Martinez family issued a statement expressing horror at how they'd been used as pawns in Caldwell's scheme. Marcus's phone rang constantly, reporters requesting interviews, advocacy groups asking him to speak, former inmates thanking him for fighting when they couldn't. But the call that mattered most came at 11:17 a.m. "Mr. Johnson?" It was Jennifer Walsh, the former prosecutor who'd provided crucial testimony. "I just wanted to say, I've lived with guilt for 5 years, knowing what I saw and being too afraid to speak up. You gave me the courage to tell the truth. Thank you." At 2 p.m., Caldwell's arraignment was broadcast live. The man who'd stood in countless courtrooms with supreme confidence now sat hunched beside his lawyer, looking 20 years older than he had at midnight. The judge, a federal judge Caldwell had no power over, denied bail. "Mr. Caldwell," the judge said, her voice cold as winter, "the charges against you include conspiracy to commit murder, which alone would justify detention. Combined with evidence of obstruction, witness tampering, and your unique position creating security risks in any detention facility, bail is denied. You will be held in federal custody pending trial." The courtroom erupted. Caldwell's face crumbled. For the first time, he seemed to understand that his carefully constructed world had collapsed completely and permanently. That evening, Marcus sat with Claire in a quiet restaurant, processing everything that had happened in less than 24 hours. "I still can't believe you've been helping me for 2 years, he said softly. "Your mother said you hated me." Claire reached across the table and took his hand. "Mom tried to make me hate you. She believed the lies, or maybe she needed to believe them. But I remembered you, Dad. I remembered how you used to read to me every night, how you'd make me laugh, how safe I felt with you. That person couldn't have done what they said you did. So when I turned 18 and Elena told me the truth, I knew what I had to do." Tears streamed down Marcus's face, not tears of grief this time, but of joy mixed with profound loss for all the years they'd missed. "I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud." "We're going to make up for lost time," Claire promised. "All of it." On the television above the bar, news coverage continued. Caldwell being led into federal detention in an orange jumpsuit, his head down, cameras flashing. Victor Reigns's arrest on additional charges. The governor signing an emergency executive order for case reviews. Organizations calling for prosecutor accountability laws. One reporter interviewed a legal expert who said, "The Caldwell case represents perhaps the most comprehensive prosecutorial misconduct scandal in modern history. The fact that it was exposed not by the system itself, but by a wrongly convicted man who spent 12 years building an irrefutable case, raises serious questions about oversight and accountability in our justice system." Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Agent Martinez. "Torres gave us everything. Caldwell paid him $50,000 to make you disappear. Recording of their conversation is admissible. This adds 25 years minimum to Caldwell's sentence. You saved your own life by moving fast." $50,000. That's what Marcus's life had been worth to Caldwell, the cost of keeping his corruption hidden for a little longer. But Caldwell had underestimated the man he tried to bury, had never considered that 12 years of suffering might forge something unbreakable. As darkness fell on Marcus's first full day of freedom, one question remained burning in everyone's mind. How many other prosecutors were out there, destroying lives to build careers? How many other innocent people were sitting in cells, waiting for someone to believe them, to fight for them, to expose the truth? The Caldwell case wasn't just about one corrupt official falling. It was about a crack appearing in a system that had protected its own for too long. And through that crack, light was finally beginning to shine. 6 months later, Marcus stood in front of a different courthouse, not as a defendant, but as a free man testifying before a state commission investigating prosecutorial misconduct. The hearing room was packed with reporters, advocates, and families of other victims. Across from him sat Richard Caldwell, now inmate number 847392 at the Federal Detention Center. The man who'd once commanded courtrooms with arrogant authority now looked diminished, his hair completely gray, his face gaunt from the stress of facing 147 years in federal prison. His expensive suits had been replaced with an orange jumpsuit. His confident smirk had vanished, replaced by the hollow expression of someone who'd lost everything. Caldwell's trial had been devastating. Every piece of evidence Marcus and Claire had collected was admissible. Victor Raines, facing his own charges, had turned state's evidence and testified that Caldwell had been on his payroll for over a decade. The burner phone revealed dozens of incriminating conversations. Bank records showed deposits that coincided perfectly with questionable convictions. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before finding Caldwell guilty on all counts. His wife had filed for divorce within weeks of his arrest. His 2 sons refused to visit him. His legal career, his reputation, his freedom, his family, all of it gone, destroyed by the same system he'd corrupted. "Mr. Johnson," the commission chair asked, "what would you say to other victims of wrongful conviction who might be watching?" Marcus looked directly at the camera. "I'd say this: never stop fighting for your truth. I spent 12 years in a cell, but I never let them imprison my mind. I used every resource available: the law library, correspondence courses, connections with people who cared about justice. And when I couldn't fight from inside, I built a network of allies on the outside who fought for me." He gestured toward Claire, who sat in the front row with Elena Cole. "My daughter and the daughter of my mentor proved that justice delayed doesn't have to mean justice denied. They showed me that the next generation can fix what the previous one broke." The commission's investigation had already borne fruit. James Peterson was released after his conviction was vacated. 3 other inmates had been exonerated and freed. 5 more cases were under review. The state legislature was drafting new laws requiring independent oversight of prosecutors and mandatory disclosure of all exculpatory evidence. But the most meaningful moment had come 2 months after Caldwell's arrest, when Marcus met the Martinez family, the people whose robbery had been the catalyst for his nightmare. Mrs. Martinez, now in her 70s, had wept when she saw him. "We had no idea," she'd said through tears. "They told us you confessed, that you'd apologized. We were so traumatized that we just wanted it to be over. If we'd known the prosecutor was lying, that you were innocent." Marcus had taken her hands gently. "You're victims too. Caldwell used your pain to serve his agenda. That's not your fault." That conversation had led to something unexpected. The Martinez family had become advocates for criminal justice reform, speaking at rallies and lobbying for the same changes Marcus supported. Victims and the wrongly accused, united by their shared manipulation at Caldwell's hands. Marcus's professional life had transformed in ways he never anticipated. A legal advocacy nonprofit hired him as a consultant, helping them identify potentially wrongful convictions. His experience gave him insights that lawyers with perfect resumes could never match. He knew what it felt like to scream the truth and not be heard, to see evidence ignored, to watch justice fail. He'd reconnected with his daughter in ways that felt miraculous. They had dinner together twice a week, slowly rebuilding 12 years of lost time. Claire had shown him photos of her high school graduation, her first apartment, her college acceptance letter, milestones he'd missed but could now celebrate retroactively. "I don't want you to feel guilty for missing those years," Claire had told him one evening. "You didn't choose to be taken from me. Caldwell chose that. And now he's paying the price while we get to build something new." The construction company Marcus had worked for before his arrest had offered him his job back with a significant raise and a public apology. He'd declined. Building houses felt like a lifetime ago. Now he was building something more important, a system where what happened to him couldn't happen to others. Financial compensation from the state for wrongful imprisonment helped, but Marcus lived simply. Most of the settlement money went toward a scholarship fund for children of incarcerated parents, administered by Claire. They'd named it the Raymond Cole Memorial Scholarship, honoring the mentor who'd taught Marcus that knowledge was power even behind bars. Tommy McGrath, the actual perpetrator of the Martinez robbery, was now serving his sentence, not just for that crime, but for 4 others he'd committed while Marcus rotted in prison for his work. In a strange twist, Tommy had written Marcus a letter of apology, admitting his role and expressing remorse for staying silent all those years. Marcus had read the letter once and filed it away. Some apologies come too late to mean much. Victor Raines lost his real estate empire and received a 20-year sentence for racketeering. His luxury properties were sold at auction, with proceeds going to a victims' compensation fund. The condos built on the Martinez family's former property were now deed-restricted as affordable housing, a small poetic justice. Mrs. Caldwell had moved to another state with a new last name, trying to rebuild her life away from the scandal. She'd sent Marcus a letter too, expressing shock at what her husband had done and offering an apology that seemed genuine. Unlike Tommy's letter, Marcus had responded to hers, thanking her for the courage it took to write it. On the anniversary of his release, Marcus returned to 271 Oakmont Drive. The house was empty now, a foreclosure sign on the lawn. He stood where he'd confronted Caldwell at midnight a year earlier, remembering the fear and determination that had driven him there. A car pulled up, Sarah Chun, his lawyer, who'd become a close friend. "Feeling nostalgic?" "Not exactly. Just thinking about how different things could have been if I'd let anger control me instead of strategy." Sarah nodded. "You could have hurt him that night. Would have been justified, some might say. And I'd be back in prison, and he'd be a victim instead of a perpetrator. Caldwell destroyed his own life by being exposed for what he truly was. That's more permanent than anything I could have done with my fists." They drove to a community center where Marcus was giving a talk to at-risk youth, kids from neighborhoods where interaction with police often went badly, where the justice system felt like an enemy rather than a protector. "The system failed me," Marcus told the assembled teenagers. "But I didn't let that failure define me. I spent 12 years preparing for one moment of truth, and when that moment came, I used evidence and patience instead of violence and rage. That's the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is quick and satisfying but ultimately empty. Justice is slow and difficult, but it changes systems, not just individual lives." One young man raised his hand. "But what if the system won't listen? What if they don't care?" "Then you make them care. You document everything. You build alliances with people who have power and integrity. You use technology, media, public pressure, every legal tool available. My daughter was 19 years old and she helped bring down a corrupt prosecutor. If she can do that, you can fight for justice too." After the talk, Claire met him outside. "Ready for dinner?" "Actually, I have one more stop to make." They drove to the cemetery where Marcus's mother was buried. He'd visited every week since his release, making up for 12 years of missed visits. He placed fresh flowers on her grave, as he always did. "I did it, Mom," he said quietly. "Took longer than I wanted, but I did it. And Claire's here with me. She grew up strong and smart, just like you. You would have been so proud of her." Claire put her arm around his shoulders, and they stood there together in the fading light, a father and daughter who'd lost so much time but refused to lose each other. That night, Marcus appeared on a national news program, his story now a symbol of both the justice system's failure and its potential for redemption. The host asked the question everyone wanted to know: After everything you've been through, do you still believe in the system? Marcus thought carefully before answering. I believe in what the system should be, and I believe in people who fight to make it better. Caldwell corrupted the system, but Sarah Chun, my daughter Claire, Elena Cole, the FBI agents who investigated, they used that same system to expose him. So yes, I believe. But belief without action is just hope. We have to do the work to make justice real. Marcus Johnson had spent 12 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. But he'd emerged not as a victim defined by what was done to him, but as a man who transformed injustice into purpose. Caldwell had tried to bury him, but instead created someone who would help others climb out of similar graves. The best revenge, Marcus learned, wasn't destroying your enemy. It was becoming so successful, so principled, so impactful that your enemy's downfall became inevitable, not through your actions, but through their own corruption finally meeting consequences they'd avoided for too long. Richard Caldwell would spend the rest of his life in prison, stripped of everything he'd valued, remembered only as a cautionary tale. Marcus Johnson would spend the rest of his life free, surrounded by people who loved him, remembered as a man who never gave up on truth even when the world stopped listening. One man built his legacy on lies and it crumbled. Another man built his legacy on patience and principle, and it stands. If this story moved you, if you believe that justice should matter more than power, then subscribe to this channel for more true stories that prove the human spirit can overcome even the most broken systems. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to let injustice have the final word.